Hey guys, Maxwell here. So, I've noticed that in the fall season, like this season is usually the time where mm, the most resistance has come from. I know a lot of these videos are talking about, oh, my resistance, I'm going through resistance. Well, I think the reason why I mentioned that is just like some seasons, like there are select seasons where people's success originates from. So for me, I noticed like the the spring summertime is usually like the season where like I get into like an easier flow, like the path, like while still bumpy, becomes more linear. But when during the fall, like mentally, that's when a lot more resistance and setbacks occur. Not, but obviously still growing in the setbacks, but like the the time feels rockier. Like during those times, the biggest lesson I've ever learned so far, and learned before too, is to tell the difference between God's suffering and Satan's suffering. Because God's suffering is the most beneficial delayed gratification you can ever experience. Because all in all, whether you believe in God or not, delayed gratification will make you happier. And we live in such a backwards world where people see delayed gratification as the greatest suffering that there is. Like, oh man, like I can never push through that. And not kind of speaking like this to mock anybody, but it's like I can imagine people, saying that, and because I've been there. I've been there. I've had that mindset of desperation when it comes to working towards a future goal that I can't like physically live in right now. But I've experienced I'll just give like an example. This was when I was keeping myself like pure. Like I was keeping myself pure of like any sexual thoughts, any destructive thoughts. And I noticed that the more that I delayed that, the higher my self-esteem was, the more inner peace I had, because God created us for sex, but he created it solely within the confines of marriage. He never intended it to be outside of it in any way. But where I'm getting with this is he gave us this like drive as humans, this sex drive, to accomplish, to use it for delayed gratification, to use it to focus entirely on our purpose. And with all that being said, I know that I'm kind of, if this video has been more veering off into stories, but the main focus really is God's suffering will never feel good in the moment. And that is not to say that you can't train yourself to enjoy the suffering. But from a worldly perspective, nobody, like the world as a whole, no one that really lives in the world, who is stuck in the world, is going to enjoy delayed gratification, or it's much harder to for people who are not living for God and living for themselves. So, and that instant gratification was with the inverse, like the living it for instant gratification and constantly enduring the suffering of that instant gratification is Satan's suffering, because Satan's suffering is suffering that sends you down a further negative, destructive, self-loathing, self-deprecation mindset that comes so easy nowadays too. Like it and that just another way of mentioning that God's ways aren't our ways, because you would think, if success is supposed to feel good, if the life that I'm supposed to live is supposed to feel good, then shouldn't the journey also feel good? Like, shouldn't everything feel good leading up to the life that I want to live? That's what, for our minds, like carnally, like not spiritually, like us as humans, like with flesh and everything, this is how we would normally think, and it makes sense, because why wouldn't we want to? If success in the future feels so good, then everything we should ever go through should feel good. It would, to ourselves, that would make complete sense. But in reality, if everything like that's the trap, because if everything feels good and there's no journey towards the goal, and if it's constant reward, pleasure, then the reward feels meaningless, because there's no adventure, there's no experience. And that's why God's suffering leads us to further enlightenment, further inner peace, happiness, because there's a journey involved, because there's a complex growth and awakening and wisdom and just maturity and so many virtues and character traits you acquire that I can't really describe all in full in this video, because it is a personal experience that people are going to have to experience for themselves. And it is not easy, obviously, because like I mentioned, God's ways aren't our ways. It's not easy, but the more that we it's like with learning anything. It's like connecting with God is like equivalent of and growing with God is the same as growing and playing an instrument, growing in mastering a sport, growing and mastering your studies. Similar to the loving the suffering that God wants us to endure for us to be the most fulfilled we can ever be. We have to, there is a level of endurance, and this is not saying you can't enjoy the process, but I'm talking on just behalf of, on a surface level, God's suffering is hard in, at the beginning, in the moment, but is extremely rewarding in the end, whereas Satan's suffering is suffering that we often inflict on ourselves because of engaging in self-pleasure and engaging in like serving ourselves in stimulation and thinking we can, I guess, and with a lack of better wording, like pleasure ourselves to success. Basically, that's what the instant grad of Satan's suffering is it's pleasuring our desires and constantly seeking comfort in the hopes that we can also be satisfied with our success. So this is just a thought that I wanted to really put out there. I kind of feel like that this is something that would fit more on the YouTube, so I'm probably just going to post it there. But thank you all so much for watching. This is just a message that God has enlightened me a lot during this fall season, and I'm not gonna lie, it is definitely tough because of the fall season is the season I do enjoy the most, and also just being, that's where a lot of spiritual warfare comes in. But overall, I love this season, and I thank you all so much for watching, and you will have a blessed night. Take care.